Mr. Are you dead? He had put 43 men in the ground. He had never once asked permission. He had never once said please. Reed Callahan. The name that made grown men go quiet in rooms across 3 states was face down in a Montana snowdrift, bleeding from a bullet his own cousin had ordered, and the only living soul within a mile was a 6-year-old girl in a red coat holding a jar of Beetles, waiting for him to answer her question. He opened his mouth. What came out wasn't words. It was just breath. Ragged and wet and too expensive to waste. But it was enough. She ran. If this story already has your chest tight, hit subscribe right now. Follow this all the way to the end, because I promise you it only gets harder from here. Drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to the moment it all broke open. The last thing Reed Callahan remembered clearly was Marco's eyes in the rearview mirror. Not the gun, not the sound, not the way the SUV left the road like something had simply decided it was done carrying them. What he remembered, what was burned into the inside of his skull with the precision of a brand, was the look on Marco Velez's face in that mirror. Calm, resolved, the face of a man who had already made his peace with what he was about to do and found the math acceptable. 22 years. Reed had known Marco Velez for 22 years. He had pulled Marco out of a Guadalajara holding cell with one phone call, one name dropped in the right ear. He had handed that man a salary, a territory, a life that Marco could not have built on his own in 4 lifetimes. And Marco had sat in that back seat, patient, quiet, waiting for the exact right mile of empty Montana road, and he had put a bullet in Reed's back like he was punching out at the end of a shift. That was what got him. Not the bullet, the patience. The SUV had hit the tree line going somewhere between 60 and 70. Reed knew it had rolled at least once because his left shoulder was located in a place shoulders were not designed to be located, and because the door beside him had compressed inward until it was kissing his rib cage. He did not remember the impact. He remembered the silence after it, the sudden absolute silence of a world that had decided he was no longer a participant. Then the cold, coming up through the metal, through his jacket, through him. He moved his right hand first. Fingers, wrist, elbow, each joint a separate negotiation. He was cataloging damage the way he always cataloged damage, systematically without sentiment, because sentiment was a luxury and he did not deal in luxuries. Left arm useless, bullet wound left side of his back below the shoulder blade. The lung on that side was doing something wrong. A wet, compressed feeling like trying to breathe through a soaked cloth. Not collapsed, not yet, but working toward it. His phone was gone. He could see the fractured windshield and the hole in it where the phone had exited. Gone. His weapon was still holstered. 11 rounds, no target. Get up, he told himself. His legs sent back a response that was not encouraging. Reed. He used his own name because that was what you did when the body was trying to negotiate with you. You reminded it who was in charge. Get up. He made it to his knees, stayed there. The wind hit him like a punishment. The snow was already coming down at an angle that meant it was going sideways more than down, and it was filling the space where the windshield used to be with the casual indifference of a storm that did not know him and did not care. He got a hand on the doorframe, got upright, stood there for a moment with his forehead against the cold metal breathing through the price of standing. Then he started walking. He did not know where the road was. He had a general sense of direction, and he followed it the way a wounded animal follows the memory of somewhere safe, not with logic, but with something older than logic. Every step was a negotiation. Every drift that came up past his knees was a separate argument. He won each one by a narrower margin than the last. He was thinking about Paxton Shaw, his cousin, his blood, the architect, because that was what this was not Marco's plan. Marco wasn't built for plans. Marco was built for execution. The plan had Paxton's fingerprints and all over it, the isolated road, the timing, the fact that Reed had been steered toward this particular meeting by 3 separate people he trusted, each one pushing him 1 degree further in the wrong direction, without any of them knowing they were part of a larger design. Elegant, patient. Paxton had always been patient. Reed had always read that as loyalty. He made it perhaps 200 yards from the wreck before his right knee buckled. He caught himself on his right hand in the snow. stayed there on all fours, breathing, counting. He had not been on his hands and knees since he was a child, since before he understood that the floor was where people put you when they wanted to show you what they thought of you. He had spent his entire adult life making sure no one ever put him on the floor again. And here he was, hands and knees in Montana, blood dropping off his left side into the snow in a pattern that was darkening too fast. "This is not how this ends," he said out loud. The storm did not respond. He lowered himself the rest of the way. Just for a moment, just to stop the spending of whatever he had left. He would get up in a minute. He would get up and he would find the road and he would survive this and he would find Paxton and he would make very specific and very final decisions about the remainder of Paxton Shaw's life. That was the plan. That was a plan he could follow. He closed his eyes. He did not mean to. His eyes opened. The voice was so small, so utterly disarmingly small, like something that didn't belong to the same world as bullets and betrayal and men bleeding in snowdrifts. He turned his head and the movement cost him, and he focused his vision, and she was just there, 10 feet away, red coat, purple hat pulled down past her eyebrows, enormous dark eyes looking at him with an expression that was not fear and not horror, but something more disquieting than both of those things: complete, undefended attention. She was holding a jar. Inside the jar, he would later note, there were rocks and a leaf and what appeared to be several living beetles. "Are you dead?" she asked. The question was sincere, not dramatic, not scared, just a genuine inquiry about his current status. "Not yet," he said. She nodded, taking this in, filing it. "You're bleeding a lot." "I'm aware." "Does it hurt?" "Yes." She tilted her head. "My name is Bree." "Okay. What's your name?" He looked at this child. He looked at the sky pressing down on everything with the weight of a decision already made. And he could not have explained this. Not then, not later, he answered her honestly. Not with the name he used in rooms, not with the name that made people step back, just the name his mother had given him before the world got to him. "Reed," he said. "Are you lost, Reed?" The question hit somewhere unexpected, somewhere south of the bullet. "Yeah," he said. "I'm pretty lost." "Okay." She turned around, completely decisive. "I'll get Mama." "Hey," his voice broke on the second word. He reached toward her with his right hand. "Hey, wait, only your mother, you hear me, nobody else. Just your mother." She turned back, looked at him with those old soul eyes. "We don't have anybody else," she said. Matter of fact, no self-pity in it at all, just information. And then she was gone, her red coat swallowed by the white. Reed Callahan put his forehead back down against the snow, and he breathed, and he thought, if I survive this, it is going to be because a 6-year-old girl in a red coat decided I was worth saving. He did not know how to feel about that. He filed it away for later. He heard them before he saw them, the small, quick footsteps of Bree, and then the longer, faster strides of someone who was moving with purpose but not panic. He raised his head. She came out of the white like she owned the weather. Dark hair, no makeup. A face that had been arranged by years of making hard decisions quickly, and it showed not in lines but in the set of her jaw, the particular stillness in her eyes. She was wearing a heavy coat and heavy boots, and she was carrying a rifle at her side with the grip of someone who had not learned that from YouTube. She stopped 6 feet away and she looked at him. Not at the blood first, at his face, at his eyes. Reed looked back. She was running math. He could see it. The rapid, unsentimental calculation of a woman sorting outcomes by probability. He recognized the process because he did it himself in different rooms for different reasons. Finding it here in this face in this storm was something he had not expected. "The bullet's still in you," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "You were shot." "Yes." "That's not a hunting accident." He held her gaze. "No." Something moved across her face. Not surprise, not fear. Something closer to recognition, the particular shift of expression that happens when you realize the thing in front of you is complicated in ways you were hoping it wouldn't be. "If I call for help," she started. "Don't." The word came out hard and flat. "If you call for help, the wrong people will know where I am inside of an hour. And after that," he stopped, changed course. "Just don't." "You understand what you're asking me," she said. You're asking me to bring you into my home, to my daughter. I'm asking you to make a choice, he said. I'm not pretending it's a simple one. She looked down at him, at the blood, at the gun still holstered at his side, at his face, which he was fighting hard to keep neutral because she was reading everything he could tell. She was reading him like a document and missing nothing. Can you stand? She said. Help me up and we'll find out. She slung the rifle across her back in one motion and crouched beside him and got his right arm across her shoulders, and she said, "This is going to be bad." "Everything's already bad," he said. "Worse than bad, then." "Do it." She stood up. The pain was so violent it blanked out a full second of his consciousness. He came back to himself, still upright, which he counted as a windjaw clamped shut on a sound he would not make in front of the child who was now standing 6 feet ahead of them, holding the rifle barrel down with the careful focus of a girl who had been taught exactly how to hold a thing and meant to hold it correctly. "Breathe," May said. Her voice was right next to his ear. He breathed. Again. He breathed again. "Keep doing that. It's not far." "How far?" he gritted out. "Far enough that we need to move now and talk later." They moved. He focused on her breathing instead of his own steady, hard-working, controlled. She was carrying more than half his weight, and she was not complaining about it, and she was not slowing down. He revised his estimate of her upward rapidly in the way he revised all estimates when new information came in. May, he said, because he needed to stay conscious, and talking helped. "What? Is that your name?" A pause. "Who told you that, Bree?" Another pause. Shorter. "Yes." "How long have you been out here?" "No questions," she said. "That's not a question about you. That's a question about where we are." "Yes, it is," she said, "and the answer is the same. No questions." He shut his mouth, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The cabin appeared out of the white without warning, just suddenly there, solid and small, and lit from inside with the kind of warm light that in any other circumstances would have been unremarkable. Right now it looked like survival itself. May got the door open without releasing him. He filed that away, the coordination required to do that with his weight on her in the cold with gloves on. She got him through the door. The warmth hit him like a wave, and his knees buckled, and she corrected without a word, redirected his weight, guided him down onto the couch with a controlled descent rather than a collapse. She stepped back and looked at him. He looked back at her. "Bree," she said without looking away from Reed, "Red kit, under your bed. Now please, is he going to be okay?" Bree's voice from somewhere near the door. May looked at Reed. Reed looked at May. "He's going to be fine," May said. Bree's footsteps went away down the hall. The moment her daughter was out of earshot, May's face changed. The layer she kept on for Bree, the calm, the reassurance, the measured certainty came off like a coat being set down, and underneath it was something considerably colder and more precise. "The bullet is still in you," she said again. "I can't remove it. I don't have the equipment, and I don't have the training. I know. I can pack the wound and slow the bleeding. If there's internal damage I can't see, there is nothing I can do about that. You understand that?" "I understand. If I don't call anyone and you die on my couch tonight, I won't." "You don't know that." "No," he said, "but I'm telling you anyway." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her sorting him, the way you sort something unfamiliar by touch when you can't see it clearly. Testing for edges, testing for what it was made of. "3 rules," she said. He waited. "No questions about me. No stories about yourself." She held his gaze, hard. "And the moment you are well enough to walk out that door, you walk out that door. No negotiation, no delays, you go. Agreed. I need you to mean that. May." He said her name directly and watched her register it, the slight tension in her jaw. The adjustment. "I mean it." She held the look for 3 more seconds, long ones. Then she turned and went to the table and started laying out what she had. He let himself breathe. He thought about Paxton, somewhere warm right now, probably already making calls, probably already reassigning Reed's territories, already deciding what story to tell, how Reed had gotten reckless, how the business had outgrown him, how the transition was always going to happen eventually. Paxton would make it sound inevitable. He was good at that, making things sound like they were always going to go the way he needed them to go. Not yet, Reed thought. You don't get to write the ending yet. Bree came back with a red canvas kit and set it on the table beside her mother with the quiet efficiency of a child who had done this before. She looked at Reed. He looked at her. You have a beetle on your coat, she said. He looked down. She was right. A small brown beetle was navigating the lapel of his ruined jacket with great determination. I'll take him, Bree said. She approached with two careful fingers and lifted the beetle and deposited it in her jar and screwed the lid on and held it up. His name is Ree, she announced, because that's almost your name. Reed Callahan had not let anything reach him in a very long time. He had structured his entire life around not being reached. He had walls built out of decisions and distances and things he'd made himself stop feeling years ago. And a 6-year-old girl named a beetle after him, and something got through anyway. Good name, he said. Bree, May's voice, gentle but firm. Room, sweetheart. Bree looked at Reed. Reed gave her one small nod. She went. Then it was just the two of them. May came at him with scissors and cut his jacket away in sections, working around the wound, and the sound he made when the fabric pulled free was not something he would ever admit to making. May did not look at his face. She worked. Clinical. Focused, pressing gauze down hard and keeping it there with a pressure that was exactly as intense as it needed to be, and no more. How do you know what you're doing? He asked. She pressed harder on the wound. He bit down. No questions, she said. Outside, the storm doubled its velocity. The windows shuddered. The walls held. Reed kept his eyes open and his breathing steady, and he thought Paxton's people are already looking for a body. When they find the wreck and no body, they will start looking for something else, and they will not stop. He had maybe 48 hours before the circle started closing on this cabin. Maybe less. May stepped back, checked her work, and looked at him with the expression of someone who had done everything within their power and was now making peace with what was outside it. Don't die, she said. Working on it, he said. She went to check on Bree. Reed lay in the dark of a stranger's passion and listened to a child's voice singing something soft and tuneless down the hall, probably to a jar of Beatles, and he stayed awake through Will Alone, and he thought about 3 things in rotation: Paxton. The look on May Sullivan's face when she thought he wasn't watching, and the fact that somewhere between the wreck and this couch something had shifted in his chest that had nothing to do with the bullet. He would deal with all 3, but first he had to survive the night. Reed did not sleep. He wanted to, his body was making a very compelling case for unconsciousness, but he didn't trust what would happen to him while he was under, and he didn't trust what would happen to May and Bree if he stopped paying attention. So he lay on the couch in the dark and he cataloged. It was the only thing he knew how to do when everything was falling apart. Count what you have, count what you don't. Build a picture from the pieces. What he had: a wound that was packed and slowed but not solved. 11 rounds. A cabin in the Montana wilderness with no clear address, which was either a problem or an advantage depending on how fast Paxton's people moved. A woman who had made her position perfectly clear, and a child who had named a beetle after him. What he didn't have: a phone, a way out, any certainty that the lung on his left side was going to continue cooperating with his plans. What he knew: Paxton Shaw was not going to find an empty wreck and walk away. That was not how Paxton operated. Paxton pulled on threads. Paxton was patient, and Paxton had people in places that most people didn't know existed: local law enforcement, county dispatch, search and rescue coordination. If someone called in an accident on that road, Paxton would know about it within 20 minutes. If someone found the wreck and reported a blood trail, Paxton would have a direction inside of an hour. Reed needed a phone, and he needed it before morning. He heard May's footsteps before she appeared, quiet, deliberate, moving through the cabin with the practiced silence of someone who'd spent years not waking a sleeping child. She came around the corner and stopped when she saw his eyes open. You should be asleep, she said. So should you. She came closer, checked the bandaging on his shoulder without asking permission, her fingers efficient and impersonal. He watched her face while she worked. Focused, controlled. Nothing she didn't choose to show. It's not soaking through yet, she said. That's better than I expected. I need a phone, he said. Her hand stopped. Made up, no. She stepped back. Absolutely not. I'm not calling anyone who's going to bring trouble here. I need to reach one person. One call, 2 minutes. After that, you can throw the phone in the snow for all I care. You said no questions and no stories, she said. That applies to your people too. Whoever you are, whatever is coming for you, I don't want it using my phone to find my front door. If I don't make this call, he said, keeping his voice level, the people looking for me are going to find me anyway. The only difference is whether I get ahead of it or whether I let it arrive on your porch without warning. That landed. He could see it land, the slight shift in her expression, the recalculation. She was smart. That was both useful and inconvenient. Who are you calling? She said. The one person on my side who isn't already compromised. How do you know they're not compromised? Because Paxton needs him functional, Reed said. He's the one person Paxton can't touch without the whole structure coming down. He's safe for now. And when you call him this safe person, what exactly happens next? He moves some pieces, buys me time. Time for what? Reed looked at her steadily. To figure out what I'm going to do next. She crossed her arms. The silence between them had weight. Outside, the storm had not relented. If anything, it had deepened the wind, finding new registers, the cabin absorbing it. One call, she said finally. I'm in the room, speakerphone. No speakerphone. Then no call. He held her gaze. She held his back. Neither of them moved. Fine, he said. She went and got a phone from the kitchen. Not a smartphone, he noted. A plain, old model flip phone. A burner or something close to it. He noted that too and stored it next to everything else he was storing about May Sullivan, which was becoming a significant collection. She handed it to him. She did not leave the room. He dialed it from memory. 4 rings, then a voice, cautious low. A man who had learned to answer unknown numbers, the way you answer a door when you're not sure who's on the other side. Yeah, it's me, Reed said. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. You're alive. Surprising. Where are you, Montana? I need you to do something from us or me. Reed, the voice dropped further. They're saying you missed a meeting. They're saying the car. I know what they're saying. Listen to me. Are you somewhere clean right now? Clean enough. Paxton is moving tonight if he hasn't already started. I need you to pull the Chicago accounts, the 3 secondary ones, not the main, and freeze them where he can't access without me. Can you do that? That's going to flag I know what it's going to flag. Do it in any way. A pause. And then what? And then sit on it. Don't call anyone. Don't tell anyone you spoke to me. Go somewhere that isn't your apartment and stay there. Read a note of something real coming into the voice now. Underneath the caution, something that might have been fear. Are you? How bad is it? Reed's jaw tightened. Do what I said, Dom. He hung up, handed the phone back to May. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Not the clinical watchfulness she used most of the time, but something more complicated. Like she was looking at a thing she recognized from a long way away and wasn't sure she wanted to recognize. Chicago accounts, she said. You said speakerphone. You agreed to speakerphone. He looked at the ceiling. I'm not going to explain my business to you, May. I'm not asking you to explain it. She set the phone on the table. I'm telling you that I know what that sentence means. I know what freeze accounts Paxton can't access means. I know what kind of business has a Paxton in it and a Dufbin and a man with a bullet in his back in a car that went off a road on purpose. But though, the room went quiet, very quiet. Then you know what the smart move is, Reed said carefully, which is to have stayed outside and left me in the snow. Yes, she said, it is. Why didn't you? She looked at him for a long moment. Then go to sleep, Reed. She left the room. He stared at the ceiling and he thought about the words she hadn't said. The reason she hadn't said. The things she'd recognized in his face, or his situation, or his voice that had made her drag a dying stranger through a blizzard rather than make the sensible choice. He thought about that for a long time before exhaustion finally overruled him and he went under. He woke to the sound of a plate being set on the table. His eyes opened fast. Old reflex, no transition, and May was standing 3 feet away with her arms crossed, watching him surface. You moved in your sleep, she said. Reopened the wound a little. I repacked it. He looked at his shoulder. Fresh bandaging. He had not woken up while she did it. That was a problem. He never slept that deep. How long was I out? 6 hours. He sat up too fast. The room tilted. He corrected. 6. You needed it. Your body made the decision without consulting you. She nodded at the plate. Eat. It was eggs. Plain practical, made by someone who cooked because bodies needed fuel and not because food was supposed to be an experience. He ate because she was right and because arguing about eggs was a level of petty he wasn't going to operate at right now. She sat across from him, watching him eat with the unsentimental attention of someone monitoring a patient. The storm isn't breaking, she said. At least 2 more days, maybe 3. He processed that. 2 or 3 days. Yes. In your cabin. In my cabin. She paused. Bree wants to check your bandages. He looked up. She's 6, May said. Not an apology, just context. May, I told her you're a friend who got hurt. That's all she knows. I need her to keep believing that, which means she can't think there's anything wrong with being near you. She met his eyes directly. So you are going to be cooperative and patient, and you are not going to say anything that scares her. Are we clear? Reed put the fork down. You're protecting her from me. I'm managing the situation, May said. There's a difference. There. She didn't answer that. She went to the hallway and said something quiet that he couldn't hear, and then footsteps, small, fast, purposeful, and Bree appeared in the doorway like a small force of nature arriving right on schedule. She was carrying the jar. Naturally. Good morning, she said to Reed with the formal solemnity of someone who took greetings seriously. Morning, he said. She came to the couch and looked at his bandaged shoulder with great interest. Mama did your bandage while you were sleeping. She was very quiet so she wouldn't wake you up. I noticed, Reed said. Do you feel better? He thought about lying. He thought about the simple, direct way she asked every question as if answers were things that should simply be accurate and she couldn't imagine a reason they wouldn't be. Some, he said. Ree is doing good, she announced, holding up the jar. The beetle in question was navigating a small rock with admirable determination. I gave him a little piece of cracker. Does he eat crackers? I don't know, Bree said, but he ate it, so probably yes. She sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the couch jar in her lap, looking up at him. Do you have kids? Bree, May said from the kitchen. That's not a question about him. That's a general question. It's absolutely a question about him. It's fine, Reed said. He looked at Bree. No, I don't. She considered this. How come? My life isn't really set up for it. What does that mean? He paused. He had answered that question automatically without thinking about it because it was the answer he always gave. And he had never once considered whether it was actually an answer or just a thing he said because the real answer was something he'd stopped being willing to look at. It means I made choices, he said, that made it hard. Bree nodded seriously as if this was an entirely satisfactory answer. My dad made choices too, she said. That's why he's not here. The kitchen went very quiet. Reed did not look toward the kitchen. He kept his eyes on Bree. That must be hard sometimes, he said. Sometimes. Bree agreed without any particular drama. But Mama says the people who stay matter more than the people who leave. No. She shrugged a 6-year-old shrug, total and complete. We're okay. Reed said nothing. He didn't trust what might come out. Bree, May's voice from the kitchen, measured. Come help me with something. Bree stood. She held the jar up so the beetle was at Reed's eye level. Say hi to Ree, she instructed. Reed looked at the beetle. The beetle apparently looked back. Hi, Ree, he said. Bree looked deeply satisfied with this interaction and went to the kitchen. Reed sat with the weight of the last 2 minutes. Mama says the people who stay matter more than the people who leave. He didn't know who May Sullivan had been before this cabin, before this life in the snow, but whoever had walked out on her and that child was a particular kind of fool that Reed had very little patience for. He filed that away too. He was building quite a file on May Sullivan, and none of the contents were what he'd expected when that small red coat came into view. He was still sitting with it when he heard the sound. Not the storm, not the wind. Something under the wind coming from outside the particular low resonance of an engine running slow. Not in a hurry, the sound of someone looking rather than going somewhere. Reed was off the couch in a motion that cost him everything he had. He was at the window before the pain fully registered. He looked out through the glass at the white landscape And there at the far edge of where visibility ended were headlights, moving slowly. Parallel to the cabin, not on the road, off it. May. He didn't raise his voice. He kept it flat and even, because flat and even was how you kept people functional when they needed to be functional. She was in the doorway of the kitchen in 2 seconds. She had read his tone exactly right. What? Someone's moving along the north tree line. Slow, deliberate. She crossed the room in 4 steps and looked over his shoulder, and he felt her go still. Bree. Her voice was completely controlled. The performance of calm that kept a child from panicking was extraordinary to witness from the inside. Sweetheart, can you go get your book and read in your room for a bit? I'm not tired. Not for sleeping, just reading. Take Ree. A pause, then Bree's footsteps going away. The moment the bedroom door clicked, May turned from the window. That road doesn't get traffic in winter, she said. Nobody drives along that tree line, not locals. No, Reed said. How did they find you this fast? He thought about the wreck, the blood trail. The direction he'd walked, he had not exactly been careful about tracks. He'd been trying not to die. They found the car. They know I was alive when I left it. They're running the perimeter. Are they going to come to the cabin? He looked at her. He made the calculation honestly because she deserved an honest calculation. They're going to knock on every door within 2 miles. They're looking for a body or a witness. Either way, yes. Eventually, they come here. How long? If there are 2 vehicles, they're splitting the grid. We have maybe 3 hours, maybe less. She absorbed this without flinching. He watched her process it, the rapid, systematic sorting of options, the elimination of the ones that didn't work, the narrowing toward what was left. He had never watched someone else do the same thing he did and found it this interesting before. I have a rifle and a shotgun, she said. No, he said immediately. If they come to my door, if they come to your door, you answer it, he said. You're a woman alone with a child in a snowstorm. You know nothing. You saw nothing. You answer questions for exactly as long as it takes to establish you're nobody interesting, and then you close the door. And where are you? Not in this room. She looked at him. There's a cellar, she said, below the kitchen. Old root cellar, the previous owner used it. I keep supplies down there. There's no floor vent, no window, no way to hear anything from inside the main cabin. Cold. Very. He held her gaze. Show me. She didn't move immediately. She was looking at his face with the same careful, searching attention she'd given him the first night, testing for edges, feeling for what he was made of. He let her look. He had nothing to hide in this specific moment from this specific person. Whatever she saw, she was going to have to decide with. You trust me to put you somewhere dark and cold with no way out, she said. With your wound, without a phone. Yes, he said. Why? He looked at her for a moment, then, because your daughter named a beetle after me. It was not the answer she expected. He could tell by the way something shifted in her face, not softness exactly. Something more guarded than soft. Something that was trying very hard not to be what it was. She turned away before it could become anything. I'll bring blankets, she said. You have 20 minutes before I need you downstairs and out of sight. Use them to eat something and change that bandage. May. She stopped. Thank you, he said. The same way he'd said it the first night. Plain, no angle. She stood with her back to him for a moment. Her shoulders did something complicated. Don't make me regret it, she said. She went to get the blankets. Reed stood at the window and watched the headlights move along the tree line, slow and methodical, and he thought about the fact that Paxton's people were out there right now in a Montana blizzard, and they were not here because they wanted to confirm a death. If they just wanted to confirm a death, they'd have put another bullet in him at the wreck and been done with it. They were out here because Paxton didn't trust Marco's single shot in a moving vehicle, because Paxton was thorough, because Paxton needed a body, which meant Reed had something Paxton didn't know he had. Time. Not much, not enough to be comfortable, but enough. He turned from the window. He had 20 minutes. He was going to use every one of them. He was in the kitchen re-examining the wound in the low light when he heard Bree's voice from down the hall, not calling out, just talking to herself, or to the beetle, the low, steady monologue of a child keeping herself company. Something about how Ree the beetle probably liked the snow because beetles were very small and didn't feel the cold the same way people did. Reed stood in the kitchen of a stranger's cabin with a gunshot wound and enemies outside, and he listened to a 6-year-old explain cold tolerance to a beetle, and something in the center of his chest did that thing again. That thing he didn't have a name for and wasn't sure he wanted one. He had spent 20 years building a life that made him untouchable, unreachable, safe behind walls of money and fear, and the particular cold authority that came with being the man other men answered to. He had been shot in the back by someone he trusted, and a child with a jar of beetles had saved his life, and a woman who kept a burner phone and a loaded rifle and said no stories, no questions, was currently pulling wool blankets from a closet to line a root cellar so she could hide him from the men who wanted him dead. He did not know what to do with any of that. He had no protocol for it. The headlights were still moving along the tree line. He went to find May. She was waiting at the kitchen floor, a panel-lifted wooden stairs going down into cold dark. She had a lantern battery-powered small and 3 blankets folded over her arm. She looked at him and then at the hole in the floor and then back at him. "There's water down there," she said, "and food, some of it. I'll come down as soon as it's clear." "If it's not clear, I'll handle it," she said simply. Finally, he looked at her. In the low light with the storm outside and the lantern casting its small circle, she looked like something that had been forged rather than grown. Like every hard thing that had ever happened to her had not broken her, but changed the composition of what she was made of. He recognized it because he'd done the same thing in different fires toward very different ends. "Bree doesn't know," he said. "No. Keep it that way." "I was planning to." She nodded toward the stairs. "Go." He took the blankets. He took the lantern. He went down into the dark and the cold, and May lowered the panel above him, and the last thing he saw before it closed was her face looking down, not afraid, not soft, just there. Steady the way a wall is steady, the way a person is steady when they've decided. The panel closed. The dark settled around him. Outside, the headlights kept moving. Reed Callahan sat in a root cellar in Montana and breathed through his wound and thought about the fact that somewhere above him, May Sullivan was about to open her door to men who worked for the person who had tried to kill him, and she was going to lie to their faces with a child in the next room and a stranger under her floor, and she was going to do it well. He could already tell because whatever she was running from, whatever had brought her out here to this cabin at the edge of the world, she had been lying to protect herself and her daughter for long enough that the skill was built into her bones. He sat in the dark and he waited, and he listened. And when the knock came, 3 heavy, deliberate strikes on the cabin door. Not a neighbor's knock, not a lost traveler's knock, but the knock of a man who expected doors to open for him. Reed Callahan closed his eyes and trusted a woman he had known for less than 24 hours with the only life he had left. 3 knocks, heavy, spaced. May had the door open before the third one finished echoing. The man on her porch was large, not tall but wide-built, like something that had been compressed rather than grown, wearing a jacket too thin for the weather and not seeming to care. He had 2 days of stubble and eyes that did the thing that certain men's eyes did, moved across everything in the room before they settled on your face, cataloging, pricing, deciding. Behind him, partially visible through the snow, a second shape, another man staying back, staying near the vehicle. May had seen eyes like that before. She knew exactly what kind of man sent them. "Evening," the wide man said. He smiled. It was a professional smile. It lived only on his mouth. "Sorry to bother you in this weather. My name's Garrett. We're out of the county, search and rescue, got a vehicle accident reported about 2 miles east SUV off the embankment. Wondering if you'd seen anything unusual. Anybody coming through?" He said it smoothly. He'd said it before tonight to other doors exactly the same way. May leaned against the doorframe, unhurried. She let a beat pass, not long enough to seem like she was thinking about it, just long enough to seem like a woman interrupted from her evening. "Lord," she said, "no, I haven't seen anyone. In this? You think someone survived that?" "Hard to say." His eyes moved past her into the cabin. Fast. Practiced. "Mind if I ask how long you have been home tonight?" "Since 3, she said. "I don't go out in storms like this if I can help it. I've got my daughter, she's in bed already." She pulled the door slightly closer to her body. Not aggressive, just maternal. Just a mother narrowing the gap between a stranger and the inside of her home. I can keep an eye out if you give me a number. You live out here alone, he said. The question landed differently than the others. Flatter, more direct. Yes, she said, same tone. Same face. He looked at her, she looked at him. The smile stayed where it was on his mouth, not going anywhere, not meaning anything. Must be tough, he said. We manage, she said. Another beat. He was looking past her again. At the couch, at the table, at the arrangement of a room that was being read the way you read a room when you're looking for signs of recent occupation by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. May had moved the plate. She'd folded the extra blanket. She checked the couch for blood and found a small dark spot on the cushion cover and flipped it over in the 90 seconds between Reed going down the cellar stairs and the knock landing on her door. She had done it without thinking. The muscle memory of hiding. We appreciate you answering, Garrett said. He handed her a card. Plain white, no county logo, just a number. You see anything, call that directly. I will, she said. He held her gaze for one more second. Something moved in his eyes that wasn't the professional smile and wasn't warmth. It was assessment. Final quiet, not entirely satisfied. Then he turned and went back to the vehicle. May closed the door. She stood with her hand flat against the wood, and she listened to the engine timing it. It idled for longer than it should have, longer than a man writing notes before driving to the next address, and then it moved. She tracked the sound of it by ear, holding completely still, until it faded to nothing beneath the storm. She went to the kitchen, lifted the panel. They're gone, she said quietly into the dark. A pause from below. Then Reed's voice, even and controlled, but she could hear the cold in it, the particular flattening that happened to voices when a body was managing temperature. How many? 2, one at the door, one at the vehicle. What did the one at the door look like? Wide, dark jacket, called himself Garrett. Another pause. Longer. She waited. That's not a search and rescue name, Reed said. That's Garrett Hale. He's Paxton's logistics man. He runs the ground operations. A beat. He believed you. I don't know, she said honestly. He was looking for something. I'm not sure he didn't find it. Silence from below. Reed, I heard you. His voice was doing something careful now, something controlled in a way that sounded like it was costing him. Give me a hand up. She reached down. He was colder than he should have been. She could feel it through his jacket sleeve when she gripped his forearm. He came up the stairs with the methodical determination of someone operating on will rather than strength, and when he cleared the panel and she got a look at his face in the kitchen light, she saw what the cold and the blood loss in the cellar had done to him in the last hour, and it was not a small thing. Sit down, she said. I'm fine. You're gray, she said. Sit down. He sat. She put the kettle on without ceremony and checked his bandaging. The cold had slowed everything, which was perhaps the one useful thing the cellar had done, and she brought him something hot without asking what he wanted because there was only one option. He wrapped both hands around the mug and said nothing, and she watched the color come back to him by degrees, which was not a fast process. Garrett Hale doesn't drive grids for search and rescue, Reed said finally. He's not built for it. Paxton sent him because he's thorough, because he's good at reading rooms and reading people. I know, May said. He's going to come back. I know that too. May. He set the mug down. His eyes came up to hers, and there was something in them that was different from the calculation she'd been reading there since the beginning. Not soft, more like stripped, like the cellar and the cold and the hour of sitting in the dark had taken away whatever layer he kept on top of the real thing. Who taught you to do that? She went still. The cushion, he said. You flipped the cushion. You cleared the table. You moved the plate. You didn't do that because it occurred to you. You did it because it was automatic. He watched her face. Someone taught you what to hide and how to be exactly the right kind of unsurprising when someone comes asking questions. That doesn't come from nowhere. The kitchen was quiet. The kettle had stopped. The storm pressed against the windows with a sound like sustained low breath. No questions, she said. May. That was the deal. Her voice was flat, final. He held her gaze. You're right, he said. It was. He picked the mug back up. She turned away. She stood at the window looking at nothing. There was nothing to see, only white. And she thought about the way Garrett Hale's eyes had moved through her cabin. And she thought about the way she'd felt standing at that door. And the thing she would not say out loud was that it had not felt as foreign as it should have. Standing at a door lying smoothly to a dangerous man, feeling the weight of the person behind you who was depending on the lie to hold. She knew that feeling. She had lived in that feeling for 3 years before she got out. Bree, Reed said. She turned. He was looking at the hallway. She slept through it, May said. She needs to stay not knowing, he said. Not because she'd say something. I don't think she would, but because she'd carry it. May looked at him. I know. She's already carrying too much, he said, not gently, just accurately. She looked at this man who had been shot, who had bled in her snow, who had put 11 rounds in his gun, and no one to point them at, who had sat in a cold cellar for an hour and come up still functional. And she thought about the fact that in the last 30 hours, nobody had said that to her. Nobody had named that specific thing. Bree carries things. She does it quietly and completely, and she is 6 years old, and she should not have to. May had known this. She had known it alone. Why do you keep doing that? She said. What? Saying the true thing, she said. The thing I'm not expecting. He considered this. Habit, he said. She almost asked where the habit came from. She stopped herself. No questions. Her rule. She had made it for a reason, and the reason was still fully operational. Garrett Hale will come back tomorrow, Reed said, shifting back. He might come back tonight if he thinks he saw something. What do we do? The we came out without her choosing it. She heard it after the fact and did not take it back. Reed heard it too. She could tell by the slight pause before he answered, the way someone pauses when they've registered something without wanting to make a point of registering it. I need to get in contact with Dom again, he said. Not a call this time. A message. Something Paxton can't intercept if he's monitoring the cell traffic in this area. He can monitor cell traffic. He has access to someone who can, yes. She was quiet, processing. There's a radio, she said. Old shortwave. Previous owner left it. I don't use it, but it's operational. Reed looked at her steadily. You know how to use a shortwave radio. The previous owner showed me, she said. Carefully. The same beat as before. The same place where he didn't ask the question he was clearly forming. Okay, he said. Can you reach a specific frequency? If it's in range. It will be. He told her the frequency. She noticed he didn't have to look it up. It was just there the way numbers were there for men whose work required them to live in numbers. There's a man named Dom Reyes. He monitors that band. If you transmit my name and the frequency, he'll respond within 10 minutes. What do I say? Tell him Garrett Hale is running the ground search. Tell him to move the timeline up and that I need the Chicago accounts active by tomorrow morning. She repeated it back to him. He nodded. She went to get the radio. She was in the back room, the one that had been a storage space when she moved in, and still was essentially, except for the radio on the shelf and the lockbox below it that he hadn't seen and she had no intention of him seeing, when she heard Bree. Not crying, not scared, just awake, the sound of a child moving through a dark cabin with the confident nonchalance of someone in their own territory. May came back to the doorway and saw Bree in the hall, the jar in her arm hair loose from sleep. Mama. Right here, baby. I heard voices. Radio, May said. I was checking the weather. Bree looked at her, the grave-reading look that 6-year-old had that saw entirely too much. Is Reed okay? He's resting. He should drink water, Bree said with great authority. That's what you said when I was sick. Water and rest. You're right, May said. I'll tell him. Bree appeared satisfied. She went back toward her room, then stopped. Turned. Mama, she said, those men. In the truck. May's body went very still. What men, baby? The ones that stopped on the road, Bree said. I saw them from my window. They had a flashlight and they were looking at the ground. She tilted her head. They were looking at tracks in the snow. The blood in May's veins dropped about 10 degrees. She crossed to her daughter in 4 steps and crouched to her level. She kept her voice the same even calm, the register she'd built specifically to keep Bree steady when the world decided not to be. How long ago? When you were talking to the doorman. So the second man, the one who'd stayed by the vehicle, hadn't been at the vehicle. He'd been around the side, looking at the ground, looking at the place where Reed's tracks came in from the north, a single trail of unsteady footprints coming from the direction of the tree line. The tracks she had not thought to cover because she'd had approximately 4 minutes between Reed collapsing on her porch and the moment she got him inside. "Okay, sweetheart," she said. "Slow, easy. Back to bed." "Are we in trouble?" Bree asked. The question was quiet. It was not a child's question, not the panicked kind. It was the kind of question that lived in the voice of a child who had been in trouble before and knew the particular texture of the air when it was coming. May put both hands on her daughter's face, looked directly into those enormous dark eyes. "No," she said, "we are not in trouble. You trust me." Bree looked at her for a moment. "Yes." "Bed." Bree went. May stayed crouched in the hallway for 3 full seconds, doing the rapid cold math of someone who had just realized the problem was a different size than they thought. Then she stood up and went back to the main room. Reed was already on his feet. He was at the window standing to the side of it, not in front of it, she noted, looking out through the edge of the glass into the dark. "Bree saw the second man," May said. "He was looking at your tracks." "I know." His voice was quiet, focused. "They know someone came to this cabin. They don't know who, but they know." "Garrett Hale is thorough," she said, using his own words. "Yes." He turned from the window. His face in the low light was doing the thing again, the stripped thing, the thing without the professional layer. Not fear, urgency, the particular sharpness of a mind that had just recalibrated the clock. "They're not coming back tomorrow. They're coming back tonight." She absorbed this. "How long?" "They'll run the other addresses first. Give it legitimacy. 2 hours, maybe less. Then we have 2 hours. May." He looked at her directly. "You and Bree should leave." She stared at him. "There's a truck in the barn. I saw it when you brought me in. If you take the south road—" "I'm not leaving," she said. "Listen to me." "No," she said. "You listen to me. The south road is under 4 feet of drift by now. The truck doesn't have chains. And if we leave this cabin in the middle of the night in a blizzard, we trade 1 problem for 3. She held his gaze. "I'm not leaving." He looked at her. She could see him sorting arguments, finding them insufficient, discarding them. "Then we do this differently," he said. "Tell me." "The cellar isn't safe anymore," he said. "They'll search the cabin if Garrett decides he wants to. They won't ask. They'll come in with a story about safety checks or search protocols, and they will go through every room." "I know. Which means I need to not be here," he said. "Not in the cabin." "Reed." "There's a structure outside, the barn," she said. "No, you're not going back out into the cold. You've already lost too much blood." "May." His voice was quiet, not commanding, not the voice he used when he was managing a room full of people who answered to him. Something different, something that seemed like it came from somewhere realer than that. "I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm telling you what has to happen to keep you and Bree safe. Those are not the same thing, and I need you to let them be different right now." She stood across from him, and she thought about the last 24 hours, and she thought about a man bleeding in her snow, and a child naming a beetle, and a knock on her door that she'd answered with borrowed steadiness that had come originally from a much darker place. And she thought about the fact that this man had said the exact right thing to every impossible question her daughter had thrown at him. And she thought about Paxton Shaw, whoever Paxton Shaw was, sitting somewhere warm and certain, and something crystallized in her chest that was colder and harder than any of it. "There's a second space," she said. "Below the barn, not just a cellar, it's built into the hill, old insulated. The previous owner," she stopped. "It's warm enough. There's a propane line." He waited. "There's also," she said carefully, "a radio transmitter already set up down there. More powerful than the shortwave. Range of about 40 miles. Reed Callahan went very still. The kitchen was absolutely quiet. "May," he said slowly. "Who are you?" She met his eyes. And this one time, she didn't deflect. She didn't invoke the rule. She just looked at him with the full weight of whatever she actually was, all of it, and she let him see it. "Someone," she said, "who had very good reasons for choosing a cabin at the end of a road nobody uses in winter." The silence between them was different now. Not the silence of two strangers managing proximity. The silence of two people who have just recognized something in each other that changes the shape of everything they thought they understood. The locked box, he said. Not a question. She didn't confirm it. She didn't need to. You have a way to contact someone, he said. Someone outside of what I have access to. I have a way to contact someone, she said, who could make your cousin's entire operation visible to the kind of people who don't forgive what they find. Reed stared at her. But I haven't used it in 4 years, she said. And the moment I use it, I stop being invisible, which means Bree stops being invisible, which is the one thing Her voice didn't break. She didn't let it break. The one thing I will not do, not for anything. Then we don't use it, he said immediately. She blinked. She had expected an argument. She had built for an argument. We don't use it, he said again. That's your line, and I'm not crossing it. We find another way. She looked at him for a long time. Most men in your position would argue. I'm not most men. No, she said quietly. I'm starting to see that. Outside, the storm pressed against everything, against the walls, the windows, the roof, the whole small structure of the life she had built out here, plank by plank, in silence with her daughter and her locked box and her rules. And inside, Reed Callahan, who should have been the most dangerous thing in the room, was sitting at her kitchen table looking at her like she was the most complicated and the most necessary thing he had ever tried to understand. 2 hours, she said. 2 hours, he agreed. Then we move you to the space under the barn. You use your frequency, you reach Dom, you move whatever needs moving. She straightened. And in the morning when this storm starts to break and Garrett Hale comes back to this door, you won't be alone, Reed said. She stopped. I'm not going to be 40 feet away in a hill, he said, while that man stands on your porch. Reed, not negotiable, he said. And the voice was back, not the raw thing, the professional thing, the thing that had run rooms full of dangerous men, quiet and absolute and with no edges. That one is not negotiable, May. She looked at him. She should have argued. She had a full argument assembled and ready, and every part of it was logically sound. She didn't use it. 2 hours, she said instead. Get warm while you can. She went to check the doors. She checked the locks and the windows and the back entry, and she stopped in Bree's doorway last, looking at her daughter curled around the jar still in her arms, Ree, the beetle presumably asleep inside it, and she stood there for a moment with the full weight of every decision pressing down. Then she went back to the kitchen. Reed was still at the table, hands around the mug, eyes open. She's asleep, May said. Good, Muddy said. She had the beetle in her arms. Something moved across his face, the thing she kept it almost catching, and then it was gone before she could name it. May, he said, quietly, whatever you were before this cabin, whatever you're protecting Bree from, I am not that. I want to be clear about that. She stood across from him. You can't know that. I know what I've done, he said. I know the difference. She looked at him for a long moment. That's either the truest thing you've said, she said, or the most dangerous one. He held her gaze. It can be both. The cabin settled around them. The storm sustained its pressure. And somewhere out in the white, Garrett Hale was knocking on doors and running a grid and getting closer by the minute to the door he'd already knocked on once. May Sullivan poured the rest of the kettle, sat down across from Reed Callahan, and for the first time since she'd dragged him out of the snow, she didn't put the wall up all the way. Not all the way, just left a small portion of it down. And Reed noticed, because he noticed everything. And he didn't say a word about it, which was the most careful and deliberate thing he had done since he woke up in her cabin. The clock was running. Neither of them looked away. The 2 hours went fast. Reed used the first 20 minutes under the barn in the space May had shown him, the one with the propane line and the transmitter that told him more about her past than anything she'd said directly to reach Dom. The transmission was short, deliberate. Reed spoke in the compressed, coded shorthand of a man who had spent decades communicating in rooms where every word was potentially someone else's ammunition. Dom responded in under 8 minutes, which meant Dom was already listening, which meant Dom was already scared. The message back was 3 things: the Chicago accounts were frozen. Paxton had called an emergency sit-down with the 4 regional heads for tomorrow morning, and Marco Velas had not been seen since the night of the shooting. Reed sat with that last piece for a moment. Marco gone, not dead. Dom would have said dead, just gone, which was its own kind of information. Paxton was cleaning up. Paxton was removing the thread that connected him directly to the bullet in Reed's back, which meant Paxton was already operating as if Reed was confirmed dead and the transition was underway. He was moving too fast. That was the error. Reed had always known Paxton's weakness, not cruelty, not ambition. Those were tools, not weaknesses. The weakness was impatience wearing the costume of decisiveness. Paxton moved when he thought the moment was right, and he moved completely, and the completeness of it left seams. Left the kind of visible, pressable seams that a man who knew where to look could find and use. Reed knew where to look. He had built the thing Paxton was trying to take. He transmitted one last instruction to Dom, a name, a number, a specific account in a specific bank, in a specific city that only Reed and one other person alive knew existed. And then he went silent, and he sat in the cold, in the low propane warmth, and he built the next 12 hours in his head, the way he built everything backwards, from the outcome he needed forward through the steps that got him there. When May came for him an hour later, he was ready. She came down the exterior stairs with a lantern and a look on her face that told him the night had not been quiet above ground. He read it before she said anything, the particular set of her jaw that meant she was managing something. They came back, he said. 40 minutes ago, she said. Different man this time, not Garrett, younger. He said he was following up on the earlier inquiry. Reed stood, the wound pulled. He managed it. What did he want? He wanted to come inside, she said. He had a story about checking whether any snow had come through the roof, said there'd been structural failures at 2 other properties on this road. Did you let him in? No, she said. I told him Bree was asleep and I'd had the roof inspected in October, and if there were structural concerns, he could put them in writing and I'd have someone look in the spring. Reed looked at her. He pushed back, she said. He was pleasant about it. He was very pleasant about it, which was the part that was supposed to be reassuring and wasn't. Her eyes were steady. I held the door. And he left. He left, she said. But Reed, she paused. He looked at my hands. What do you mean? When I had the door, she said, he looked at my hands. The way you look at someone's hands when you're checking for something wrong, for whether they're steady, for whether she stopped, for whether you're scared, Reed said quietly. Yes. Were you? She met his eyes. I was angry, she said. It reads the same from the outside, if you do it right. He studied her face, the composed, capable, infuriating face of a woman who kept revealing new rooms every time he thought he'd found the walls. They're escalating, he said. Sending a second man to a door they already knocked on, that's not search protocol. That's surveillance. They're building a reason to come back with more. How many more? Garrett doesn't move with fewer than 4, he said. And if Paxton calls it, he sends 8. May was quiet for a moment. Then Dom, did you reach him? Yes. Paxton's calling a sit-down tomorrow morning with the 4 regional heads. She absorbed this. What does that mean? It means he's consolidating, Reed said. He needs the regions to confirm alignment before he moves everything into his name. If even one of the 4 refuses to sit or worse walks out, the whole structure wobbles. Can you make one of them refuse? He looked at her. You understand how this works, he said. Not a question. I understand how power transfers work, she said flatly. Yes. There's one, Reed said. Vincent Caruso, Chicago. He and Paxton have been running parallel operations for 3 years and pretending not to. Vincent knows that once Paxton has full control, the parallel operation becomes a liability. He's been loyal to me because I was useful. He'll stay loyal to whoever is most useful going forward. He paused. If he knows I'm alive, he doesn't sit at that table. Then he needs to know you're alive. He needs more than that, Reed said. He needs proof, something I can give him that only I could know, something Paxton can't fake. Can Dom carry it to him? Dom carrying it makes Dom a target, Reed said. The moment Paxton knows Dom is in contact with someone, Dom becomes the thread. And Dom, he stopped. Dom matters to you, May said. Boss. He didn't answer that directly. Dom has been with me longer than Marco. Since before there was anything worth being with. He paused. I'm not going to use Dom as a messenger and get him killed. The propane heater made its small sound. May was looking at him with an expression he was starting to be able to read. Not the surface expression, the real one underneath it, the one she didn't know she was wearing, when she was thinking about something that actually mattered to her. "There's another my anthem," she said. He waited. "The contact I mentioned," she said carefully. "The one I said I wouldn't use. I'm not talking about using it the way I said I wouldn't on the federal access, not the exposure. There's a layer underneath that. A person, not a system. Someone who moves information without leaving tracks. Someone who could carry a message to Vincent Caruso in Chicago by morning without a single fingerprint on it." Reed looked at her very carefully. "You have a contact in Chicago." "I have a contact," she said, "who has contacts everywhere. And you trust them." "I trust them the way you trust a tool that is never broken," she said. "Not because I know their heart, because I know their record. Using them doesn't expose you. Not if I do it the way I know how," she said. "It would require me to use the transmitter. The encoded frequency. It would take about 10 minutes and it would work and it would leave nothing with my name on it." Reed was quiet. He was running the math. He was checking the math for the places where it broke. He was looking at May Sullivan in the low propane light, and he was thinking about every judgment call he had made in 20 years of making judgment calls and whether this one was the kind he could afford to get wrong. "What's the cost?" he said. Not money. He wasn't asking about money. She understood. "I call in something I've been holding," she said. "A favor in the world I come from, the kind that doesn't come back around. You'd spend it on this." "I'd spend it on getting those men off my road," she said. "The rest of it is your business." He held her gaze. "Do it," he said. She was already moving. He followed her back up to the transmitter, and he stood back while she worked it in the fluency of it, the practiced ease with which she moved through frequencies and codes that she'd said she hadn't touched in 4 years. He cataloged all of it, and he stored it, and he understood with the complete clarity of a man who had spent his life reading people for survival that the woman in front of him was not who she had been when she came to this cabin. She was something assembled on top of something else, something rebuilt from material that had been forged in circumstances he could not yet fully see. She transmitted for 9 minutes. She received a response in under 4. 3 short bursts of encoded signal that she translated with the ease of someone reading their first language. "Confirmed," she said. "Vincent Caruso will receive a message from a source he trusts by 4 this morning." She paused. "The message will include proof of life in the form of the phrase only you could send." "How did you know the phrase?" She turned and looked at him. "I didn't," she said. "You transmitted it to Dom earlier. My transmitter was already on the same frequency." A beat. "I heard everything you sent." The room was very still. "You didn't say anything," he said. "No," she said. "I didn't." He thought about what he'd transmitted to Dom, the account number, the bank, the city, the specific code that was a dead man's switch for his entire financial structure, the thing that if triggered by the right person with the right key would redistribute and protect everything he'd built before Paxton could touch it. He had transmitted that in what he believed was a secure private channel. May had heard every word. "You could have used that," he said slowly. "What you heard. You could have leveraged it." "Yeah," she said simply. "Why didn't you?" She set the transmitter down. She turned to face him fully. And this time the wall was not partially down, it was not gone. It was never going to be gone. He understood that, but it was low enough that he could see the real height of the person behind it, and the height was considerable. "Because I'm not that anymore," she said. The sentence sat between them, whole and heavy and containing more history than the words themselves could carry. He didn't ask what that was. He had promised not in words, but in the way he had held the boundary she drew not to push past what she was willing to give. He kept the promise. "Thank you," he said, for the 3rd time in 2 days. Still plain, still no angle on it. She picked the lantern up. "We should go back inside," she said. "You need to sleep, and I need to be visible in that cabin in case anyone else comes to the door." "May." She stopped. "Whoever you were before this," he said, "I'm not going to pretend I don't know there's a before, but whoever you are right now in this," he stopped, started again. "You're the reason I'm still alive. I want you to know I understand what that cost." She stood with the lantern and the shadows moving across her face and the storm pressing in from every direction. "It hasn't cost me yet," she said quietly. "Ask me again when this is over." They went back inside. Bree was awake, not distressed, just sitting at the kitchen table in her pajamas, with the jar in front of her and a cup of something May had clearly left for her, watching the door with the patient, knowing expression of a child who had decided to wait rather than to worry. "Hi," she said to Reed. "Hi," he said. "You were in the barn." Reed looked at May. May looked at the ceiling very briefly, back down. "Yes," Reed said. "I was checking something." "In the middle of the night?" "Yes." Bree considered this with great seriousness. "Okay," she said, finally accepting it with the completeness only 6-year-olds could manage. She held up the jar. "Ree found a crack in the lid. I had to put tape on it." "Smart," Reed said. "If he got out in the cabin, that would be bad," Bree said. "Not for him, but Mama doesn't love bugs inside." "That's accurate," May said, and the dryness in her voice was so sudden and so human that Reed almost laughed, and it pulled at his wound, and he managed it without showing it. "Bree," May said. "Did. For real this time. But, sweetheart." May crossed to the table and crouched down and did the thing she did, the two-handed hold on her daughter's face, the direct look. "2 more hours of sleep. When you wake up, I'll make the good pancakes." Bree's eyes moved to Reed. "Will Reed still be here?" The question landed in the room with the gentle, uncomplicated weight of something a child says without knowing it contains anything heavy. May did not look at Reed. Reed looked at Bree. "Yes," he said. "I'll still be here." Bree seemed satisfied. She slid off the chair, collected her jar, and went down the hall. Her door clicked. The kitchen was quiet. May straightened up from the crouch slowly. She put both hands flat on the table, her back to him. "You said you'd still be here," she said, not accusing, not soft, just noting it. "Yes. She's going to remember that. I know. When you leave," she stopped. "When I leave," he said, "it'll be her choice whether she remembers it as a promise I kept or one I didn't. I'd like it to be the first one." She turned around. Her face was doing the complicated thing, the thing where multiple true feelings were happening at the same time, and she was deciding in real time which ones to let through and which ones to hold back. He recognized the process. He lived in it. "The sit-down is in the morning," she said. "If Vincent doesn't go and Paxton reads it as a fracture, Paxton will move differently," Reed said. "He'll want to find the fracture before it spreads. That buys me time, and it pulls his attention east, away from Montana." "And Garrett Hale." "Garrett follows Paxton's priority," Reed said. "If Paxton redirects, Garrett redirects. So by tomorrow afternoon, this road goes quiet," he said. "Maybe." "Maybe," she said. "I won't lie to you about the maybe." "No," she said. "I didn't think you would." They were standing in her kitchen at 3 in the morning with a storm outside and men on her road and a child asleep with a beetle. And between them, something that had no name yet and maybe shouldn't have one, something built out of 36 hours of necessity and honesty and the specific intimacy of two people who had survived too much to be careless with each other. "There's something else," Reed said. Her eyes sharpened. "What?" "The bag in my jacket," he said. "The inner pocket. When you cut the jacket off, you found it." She was very still. "I know you found it," he said, "because when you redressed the wound, you put the jacket where you could see it, and you've been careful not to mention it." The silence had a different quality now, denser, more careful. "Yes," she said, "I found it." "The phone in the bag," he said. "That's not a personal phone, it's an ops phone. It has records on it that Paxton cannot get access to, communications account structures, names. If Paxton's people find it in this cabin, they have everything they need to take the whole organization, and they have a reason to remove every witness." "Which includes Bree," she said. Her voice was completely flat. The flatness of a woman who had just done the calculation and confirmed the answer and was managing the result with every skill she had. "Yes," he said. "Where is it now?" she said. "I need you to tell me," he said, "because you moved it." She looked at him. "It's in the locked box," she said, "under the transmitter. I need it back, May." "I know." She moved immediately. Not hesitation, she'd already decided before he asked he could see it. I'll get it now. She was back in 4 minutes. She handed him the phone, small matte, black, sealed with a 4-digit code. He entered from memory, and she watched his face while he checked the contents and found them intact. The calls on that phone, she said. I didn't look at them. He believed her. He didn't say so because saying so implied he'd considered she might have, and that wasn't where they were anymore. This phone goes with me when I leave, he said. Whatever happens between now and then, if Garrett comes back, if anyone comes back, you don't know about this phone. You've never seen it. Understood. And the locked box, he said. Whatever's in it. She met his eyes. Not your business, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. Another layer. Another room neither of them was entering. He had said he wasn't, Paxton wasn't, that before she was protecting Bree from, and he meant it, and meaning it meant respecting the locked box, whether he liked it or not. He sat back down on the couch. The wound was talking to him, not screaming, but a sustained, insistent pressure that meant the body was running below the line and needed maintenance he couldn't fully give it. He pressed the heel of his hand against it and breathed through it, and it backed off by degrees. May watched him. How bad? Manageable. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have that keeps us both functional, he said. She sat in the chair across from him. Close enough that this felt different from the first night. The distance had changed, not because either of them had moved dramatically, but because 36 hours of surviving the same crisis had done what 36 hours of surviving the same crisis does to distance. It compresses it. It makes the space between two people measurable in different units than it was before. Tell me something, she said. He looked at her. Not about the business, she said. Not about Paxton. Something real. Something from before. He was quiet for a moment. This was not a request he received. He could not remember the last time someone had asked him for something real and not meant a name or a number or a decision. My mother had a garden, he said. May didn't move. She listened the way people listen when they know something true is coming and they don't want to interrupt it. Small one, he said, behind a row house in South Boston. She grew tomatoes and mint and something she called flowers, but I don't think was actually a standard flower. She went out there every morning before anything. He paused. I haven't thought about that garden in probably 15 years. What made you think of it now? May said. He looked around the cabin. You have mint in there, he said, nodding toward the kitchen. I smelled it the first night when I was going under. A beat. I thought I was dreaming. She looked at him for a moment. Then, my grandmother grew it, she said. I can't not have it somewhere. They sat with that. Two people and their grandmothers and their mothers and the mint that connected one small life to another across decades without anyone planning it. Reed, she said. Yeah. Vincent Caruso gets the message. Paxton's sit-down fractures. Garrett Hale moves east. She paused. And then what? For you. He thought about it honestly. I put it back together, he said. Or I dismantle it differently than Paxton planned to. Which one? I don't know yet, he said. That's the first honest answer I've given to that question in a long time. She looked at him. That's not nothing, she said, knowing you don't know. No, he said, it's not nothing. The fire in the wood stove had burned down. The propane heater in the corner was doing the work now, low and steady. Outside, the storm had shifted, not breaking, not yet, but changing, register the way storms do in the last hours before they start to let go. A different quality to the wind, a different weight to the silence between the gusts. Reed felt it before May said anything. The change in atmosphere, the thing that had been building since the first knock on the door. Then May said very quietly, someone's in the barn. He was on his feet before the sentence finished. She was already up, already moving toward the rifle. No panic in either of them, just the immediate synchronized response of two people who had stopped being strangers somewhere in the last 12 hours without noticing the exact moment it happened. How do you know? He said. The horse, she said. She only makes that sound when there's something unfamiliar. She had the rifle. She held it the way she always held it. Garrett didn't leave. He parked somewhere and waited. Reed had the ops phone in his jacket. He had 11 rounds. He had a wound that had been losing ground since midnight, and a woman next to him who he was not going to let take the forward position on this. Stay here, he said. Reed, with Bree, he said. May, stay with Bree. She looked at him. The struggle in her face was real, She was not built for staying behind. He could see it. It went against every reflex she had. But she was also a mother first and always, and Bree's door was 12 feet away, and the choice was not actually a choice at all. Front door, she said, not the back. The back has a blind spot from the barn angle. Got it. Reed. Her voice stopped him at the door. He turned. Her face was the most unguarded he had seen it, and it lasted only a second, and it contained something he did not have a word for, but would spend a significant amount of time later trying to find one. Come back inside, she said. He held her gaze. That's not a request, she said. I know, he said. He went out the front door into the cold and the dark and the shifting storm, and behind him he heard May's footsteps going directly and without hesitation to her daughter's room, and that was the last thing he heard before the Montana night swallowed him whole. The cold hit him like a wall the moment he cleared the front door. Reed moved along the cabin's exterior with his right hand against the wood, keeping the structure at his back, gun drawn and angled down. The wound in his shoulder was running hot now. The bad kind of hot, the kind that meant the body was throwing everything it had at a problem it wasn't sure it could solve. He managed it the way he managed everything that tried to stop him. He acknowledged it and kept moving. The barn was 30 feet from the cabin. He covered it in the dark without a light, counting steps, relying on the spatial memory he'd built in the 2 days since May had walked him through this property. He knew where the ice was. He knew where the ground dropped. He moved fast and low and quiet, and the storm helped the wind-covered sound the dark-covered shape, and whatever was in that barn had not yet come out, which meant either they didn't know he was coming or they were waiting for him to arrive. Both possibilities were manageable. He reached the barn door, put his back against the frame, listened, breathing. One person. Maybe 12 feet inside to the left, slightly elevated on the old wooden partition that separated the horse stall from the storage side, not moving, waiting. Reed went through the door fast and low and put himself inside the frame of the dark and said, "Don't." A beat of absolute silence. Then a voice he had not expected, young, male, frightened in the specific way of someone trying very hard not to sound frightened. "I'm not armed." Reed kept the gun level. "Name?" "My name is Cal," the voice said. "Cal Reeves. I work for Garrett. I drive. That's all I do. I just drive." A pause. "I don't want to be here." Reed's eyes adjusted. The shape of a young man, maybe 22, 23, sitting on the partition with his hands visible and open. Thin, pale, the face of someone who had taken a job without reading the fine print and was now reading it very carefully. "How did you get in here?" Reed said. "Side door," Cal said. "The one with the broken latch. I wasn't trying to get into the cabin. I just needed to get out of the cold. Garrett doesn't know I'm here. I told him the truck had a fuel line issue and I needed to stay with it. He took the other vehicle and left me." "Why?" Cal's hands were still up. He was looking at the gun with the focused attention of someone doing math about their immediate future. "Because I heard what he said on the radio," Cal said. "After we left here the second time, he called someone. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. He said the woman was lying. He said there were fresh tracks on the north side that didn't match a resident coming home. He said he was going to come back with the full team and go through the property." A beat. "He said it didn't matter what they found after. He used those words. It doesn't matter what they find after." The barn was very quiet. It doesn't matter what they find after. Reed had heard that specific formulation before. He had given that order himself once years ago in a city that wasn't this one, and he had spent considerable time since then wishing he hadn't. He knew exactly what it meant. It meant the objective was the removal, and the evidence was secondary, and everyone on the property was part of the evidence. "When?" Reed said. "First light," Cal said. "That's what he said. First light, full team, 4 men." Reed lowered the gun by 2 degrees, not all the way. "Why are you telling me this?" Cal looked at him. Young face, old fear in it. "Because there's a kid in that cabin," he said. "I saw her when Garrett knocked the first time. She was in the window. She had this jar. There was something in the bar. I don't know what bugs, maybe." He stopped. "I have a little sister," he said. "She's 7. The barn was quiet for a long moment. Reed looked at this kid because he was a kid under the jacket and the fear and the bad choices that had led him here, and he made a decision. "You're going to do something for me," Reed said. Okay, Cal said immediately. You're going to fly to the nearest town with a working signal, and you're going to make one call. Not to Garrett, not to anyone who works for Garrett or for Paxton Shaw. You're going to call the number I give you, and you're going to say 2 words. Can you do that? Yes, Cal said. Reed gave him Dom's number. He gave him the 2 words, the ones that would tell Dom that the Montana problem had just become a Montana emergency and that the timeline had moved from tomorrow morning to right now. And then Reed said, you get on a highway and you drive until the name Paxton Shaw means nothing in whatever town you stop in. You don't go back to Garrett. You don't answer calls from anyone who knew you 3 days ago. You understand me? Cal was nodding before Reed finished speaking. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Go, Reed said. Cal went. The side door closed behind him and the barn was quiet, and Reed stood for a moment with his hand pressed against his wound and his mind already 3 steps ahead, building the next hour out of what he had. First light was 3 hours away. Maybe less. He went back inside. May was in the hallway between Bree's room and the kitchen when he came through the door. The rifle was in her hands and her face went through something complicated and fast relief anger. Recalibration, all of it inside 2 seconds. And then it was the composed face again, the one he'd been reading for 48 hours and had finally learned to see through. One of Garrett's, he said quietly, young driver. He gave me the timeline. He told her. He kept it short and factual, the way she received information directly without cushioning, because she didn't need cushioning, and adding it would have been an insult. Her jaw tightened when he said first light. That was all. One visible response, and then she was processing. 4 men, she said. 4. And we have 3 hours. Less, he said. Cal's driving to get a signal. Even if he makes the call, what Dom can do from Chicago in 3 hours isn't enough, she said. No. She looked at him, steady, thinking. He watched her build the same structure he was building, arriving at the same walls, the same insufficient exits. He watched her hit the lockbox in her own mind, and then he watched something happen in her face that he had not seen before, not the wall coming down, but a different thing. A decision. The kind that doesn't feel like a choice when you're making it because it's already been made somewhere below the thinking level. I told you I wouldn't use it, she said. He went still. The federal access, she said. The contact I've been protecting for 4 years. I told you Bree stops being invisible the moment I use it. May, I know what I said, she said. I also know what first light means when the order is it doesn't matter what they find after. Her voice was completely level. The levelness cost her something. He could see what it cost. Bree is not visible if she's alive, she said. She is visible in every other circumstance. The logic was the logic of a mother. It was absolute and it was correct, and it was the most devastating thing he had heard in 3 days. You do this and you can't come back from it, he said. Your cover was going to end eventually, she said. Everything ends eventually. She looked at him directly. You know that better than anyone. He held her gaze. He wanted to argue. He had an argument fully built and ready, and every piece of it was structurally sound, and he looked at her face and he put it down. What do you need, he said. 10 minutes on the transmitter, she said, and for you to stay in this room with Bree. May. Stay with Bree Reed. Not hard, no, not an order, just her voice underneath all the other versions of her voice, the real one. She trusts you. If this goes sideways, she needs someone she trusts. He looked at her for a long time. It's not going sideways, he said. No, she agreed, it's not. And in the certainty in her voice was the real kind, not the performed kind she used on Bree, but the kind built from knowing your own capabilities down to the bone. Because I'm not going to let it. She went to the back room. Reed went to Bree's door. He sat on the floor outside it, back against the wall, gun in his lap. He listened to the storm, and he listened to May's voice through the back wall, too quiet to hear words. Just the rhythm of it, controlled and precise. A woman speaking in the specific register of someone who is cashing in the most expensive thing they own and doing it without shaking. 8 minutes passed, 9. On the 10th minute, May came back down the hall. She stopped when she saw him on the floor outside Bree's room. Something moved through her face. Done, she said. What did you call in? Enough, she said, that Garrett Hale and 4 men arriving at this property at first light will be met with people who outrank whatever Paxton Shaw thinks he has. She paused. And enough that Paxton's sit-down this morning is going to have 3 uninvited guests who carry federal credentials. Reed looked up at her. You just ended Paxton's operation. I ended my invisibility, she said. The operation is your problem. A beat, or your opportunity, depending on how you use the next 6 hours. He got to his feet. The wound argued. He won the argument. He stood in front of her in the hallway of her cabin, and he looked at the person she had just finished choosing to be, and he thought about every room he had ever stood in, and every decision he had ever made, and whether any of it had produced a single moment with the specific gravity of this one. He didn't think it had. Mama. Both of them turned. Bree was in her doorway, hair loose, jar under her arm, looking between them with those enormous dark eyes that saw entirely too much and always had. Hey, baby, May said. Her voice shifted. Not false, just warmed. The same voice the real one just warmed. Is it morning? Bree asked. Not yet. Why is everyone in the hallway? Reed crouched down to her level. She looked at him with the direct, uncomplicated attention she had given him since the first moment in the snow. No fear, no confusion, just presence. Full presence, the kind adults spent years learning to perform, and children did naturally. We're figuring some things out, he said. Grown-up things. Yes. She considered this. Is it going to be okay? He held her gaze. He thought about what it meant to make a promise to a 6-year-old. He thought about the weight of it, the permanent, specific weight of a child's trust. And he thought about the fact that he had spent 20 years in a world that ran on promises nobody intended to keep, and he thought about what it would mean to be different from that. Even once, even now. Yes, he said, it's going to be okay. Bree looked at him for one more second. Then she held the jar up. Ree is awake, she announced. He's been walking around since the middle of the night. Busy beetle, Reed said. He's curious, Bree said with the authority of someone who had extensively studied the subject. Some beetles just are. She looked at the well. I think that's a good thing. She went back to her room. The door clicked shut. Reed straightened up. He and May stood in the hallway and the quiet settled around them. And it was a different quiet from all the previous ones, not the quiet of 2 strangers managing proximity, not the quiet of 2 people holding information back from each other. The quiet of something that had passed through a fire and come out changed in composition the way May had described herself to him without using those words. You should sleep, she said. So should you. I'll take the chair, she said. I want to be near the front window. May. He paused, found what he was trying to say. After this, when it's over, when Garrett doesn't come and Paxton's people are occupied with things more pressing than Montana, you're going to have decisions to make. I know, she said. I'm not going to tell you what they should be. He said, that's not something I get to have a say in. What happens to you and Bree, where you go, how you rebuild the invisible. He stopped. That's yours. She watched him. But if there's something I can do, he said. A name moved, a record adjusted, resources that don't come attached to anything that puts you back on a list, I have those. I want you to know I have those. You'd spend them on me, she said. I'd spend them on Bree, he said, because she's 6 years old and she should get to be invisible if she wants to be. Because she names beetles after people she's known for 2 days, and she carries things quietly, and she deserves a world that doesn't ask that of her. He held May's gaze. And because you built that for her out of nothing, in the middle of nowhere, alone. And that is not nothing, May. What you built is not nothing. She stood in her hallway and she looked at him, and her face did the most complicated thing it had done in the 48 hours he had been reading it, all the layers at once, the composed one and the capable one, and the mother one and the one underneath, all those that she kept the most carefully, the one that had its own history, in its own wounds, in its own particular kind of longing that she had clearly decided years ago was too expensive to spend. Thank you, she said, for the first time. Her words her turn, and they were just as plain as when he said them, and just as real. He nodded. She went to the chair by the front window. He went back to the couch. The storm outside was changing. He could feel it in the pressure of the air. the different quality of the silence between gusts. Not breaking yet, but tipping. The way everything tips eventually when it's been running too long at full force. He pressed his hand against his wound, and he breathed, and he thought about Paxton sitting in a room somewhere right now, confident, moving pieces on a board he believed he owned. He thought about the moment probably around 6 this morning when that confidence was going to meet reality. Federal credentials at a sit-down table. Garrett Hale's team stopped cold at the edge of a property they were never going to reach. An organization that thought it had a dead man discovering the dead man had been busy. He thought about Dom, who would get the call from Cal and start moving, and who had been with Reed long enough to know exactly what moving meant and exactly how to do it. He thought about Vincent Caruso in Chicago, getting a message from a source he trusted, learning that Reed Callahan was alive and that Paxton had lied to his face, and what a man like Vincent did with that information. He thought about a garden in South Boston. Tomatoes and mint, and something that wasn't quite a standard flower. He thought about May 6 feet away in the chair, watching the dark through the window, with the rifle across her knees the same way she'd been watching everything since before he arrived, steady and ready, and carrying more than she should have had to carry for longer than she should have had to carry it. He closed his eyes. He slept. When he woke, it was to light the particular gray-white light of a Montana morning after a storm that had finally, in the deep hours, let go. Not sunshine. Not yet. But the pressing dark was gone, and the wind had dropped to something that moved rather than hammered, and the world outside the window had gone from violent to simply cold. May was in the chair, awake. She had not slept. He could tell by the particular stillness of someone who had been in the same position for a long time and was doing the discipline required to keep the tiredness from becoming weight. "What time?" he said. 6:40, she said. "Garrett didn't come." The sentence was simple and enormous. "No," he said. "The road's been quiet since 4. She paused. "Dom called. He used the shortwave 14 minutes ago." She looked at him. He said the sit-down in Chicago ended before it started. He said Vincent Caruso walked in with 2 federal agents and the other 3 regional heads walked out immediately. He said Paxton. She stopped. "What?" Reed said. "He said Paxton's in custody," she said, "as of 5 this morning." The room was absolutely quiet. Reed sat with it. 20 years of building something, and the man who tried to take it in a single night was in federal custody by the morning. The math of it was almost too clean, almost too fast. But that was how it worked. When you pulled the right thread, everything unraveled at once because the whole structure had been held together by the single lie that Paxton was untouchable. He wasn't. He never had been. Reed had just needed 48 hours in a Montana cabin to remember that. "Bree," he said. "Still asleep," May said. "She'll be up in an hour. I promise pancakes." He looked at May. She looked at him. The morning light came through the window, and it was not dramatic, it was just light. The ordinary specific light of a day that had decided to exist after a night that had tried very hard to prevent it. "You need to see a doctor," she said. "I know." "Today," she said. "Not eventually, today. Dom's sending someone, a private physician, should be here by noon." He paused. "That's fine," she said. He nodded. "And after that, Risa, after that," she said, "you leave." She held his gaze, not cold, not hard, just the truth said directly the way she said everything. "That was the deal." "That was the deal," he agreed. She looked at him for a moment. "The name," she said. "The offer you made, resources adjusted records, still stands," he said. "No conditions attached, no expiration." "How do I reach you?" she said. "If I need it." He told her, a number, a name to use, a single phrase that would tell whoever answered that it was her. She didn't write it down. She filed it in the same place she filed everything deep and permanent and instantly accessible. "Reed," she said. "Yeah. When you put your operation back together." She paused. "Or when you dismantle it differently, whichever one you decide." She looked at him with the full weight of whatever she actually was, the before and the after, and the things in the lockbox and the mint from her grandmother, and the woman who had stood at a door and lied with absolute steadiness to protect a man she didn't know anything. "Make better choices than the ones that put you in my snow." He held her gaze. "That's a high bar," he said. "It's the right bar," she said. He nodded. Yeah, he said. It is. Bree's door opened. Small feet on the wood floor. The jar arriving in the kitchen ahead of its owner, held at arm's length and examined in the morning light. Bree appeared in the doorway in her pajamas with her hair in complete disarray and her face carrying the particular soft seriousness of a child who has just woken up and not yet decided what the day is going to be. She looked at Reed. She looked at her mother. She looked at the jar. Bree walked all night, she said. He's tired. Let him rest, May said. But I wanted to show him the morning it, Bree said with complete sincerity, because mornings are different from nights. They're better. Reed looked at Bree. He looked at May. May was looking at her daughter with the expression of a woman who had built everything she had left around protecting this specific small person and had just made the most expensive choice of her life to keep doing it. And the expression was not hard and not sad and not heroic. It was just love, plain and total, the way mint grows without being asked in whatever ground it finds, reaching toward whatever light is available. He'll see plenty of mornings, Reed said to Bree. She seemed satisfied with that. She went to the table and set the jar down carefully in the morning light and watched the beetle move, and May went to the kitchen to start the pancakes, and Reed sat on a couch in a Montana cabin with a bullet still in his back and an empire to reclaim, and a phone full of the evidence that would dismantle his cousin's ambitions down to the foundations. And he felt for the first time in a very long time something that was not strategy or calculation or the cold comfort of being the most dangerous person in the room. He felt it and he didn't name it. He let it be what it was without putting walls around it. Outside, the storm was over. The road was quiet. The morning was doing what mornings do, arriving without ceremony, indifferent to what the night had cost, offering light anyway. When the doctor came at noon, Reed was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee May had made without asking how he took it. Black, which was correct, which he did not mention, while Bree explained to him the full taxonomy of beetles she intended to collect before spring, with the seriousness and specificity of a future scientist who had already decided the world was worth studying. He listened to every word. At 2 p.m, a black vehicle came up the road, Dom's man, punctual professional, carrying a medical case, and no questions. At 3, the bullet was out. At 4, Reed Callahan stood at the door of May Sullivan's cabin with the ops phone in his jacket and 11 rounds still in his gun, and a wound that was closed and clean, and a long road ahead in every possible sense of the word. Bree was at the table. She held the jar up when he looked at her. Reed says goodbye, she announced. Tell him I said goodbye back, Reed said. She nodded gravely. Done. He looked at May. She stood with her arms crossed and her face composed, and the real thing underneath it entirely visible, just for this moment, just for the length of a look between two people who had been through a fire together and come out changed and knew it. May, he said. Go, she said. Not unkind, not cold, just final the way real things are final. The way doors close when it's time for them to close. He went. The cold hit him, and the light hit him, and the road stretched out ahead of him into a world that Paxton Shaw no longer controlled, and Reed Callahan walked into it carrying everything he'd arrived with. And one thing he hadn't, the specific, irreversible knowledge, that somewhere in a cabin at the end of a Montana road, a woman who had rebuilt herself from the bones up was making pancakes for a girl who named beetles after strangers, and that this was not nothing. It was in fact everything. And he was going to spend the rest of his life making choices that were worthy of knowing it.